30 minutes. Thank you very much. So this is an experimental talk for me, so I apologize. I was asked to talk about the role of the sperm in the facilitation of fertilization. And in many ways, it's the question, which came first, the sperm or the man? But because my dear friend Sherman is here, I want to extend it and talk about the question of the role of the sperm in fertilization and maybe even in life. And let me start by saying that there are many different parts of the sperm, and we think about different aspects of them, and I want to give a basic cell biologist perspective, starting, let me go back, starting with the nucleus. So the DNA within a sperm, within all of our cells, is 2 meters long, right? I mean, think of the mechanical, the geometrical challenge of squishing this 2 meters, and it is 2 meters long, within the nucleus of a sperm. And the DNA within the sperm, the DNA this is the right length, but it's 40 million times thinner. I mean, so just when you see things, think about actually the dimensions, the actual dimensions that go on in there. And we know that the DNA plays a number of roles. There are histone modifications, all sorts of other things. But I want to go through the different parts of the sperm. And something that I wanted to also explain is how misleading our imaging is. So when we, when we look at this is what you call PhD, push here dummy. So when you look at a sperm tail, you think that by the imaging, you're seeing the whole sperm tail, you think you're seeing the mitochondria, you think of the nucleus, but with microscopy, we are detecting things. We are not resolving things. And so when Pasquale spoke earlier, and I talked about the quick freeze deep etch, I want to remind you that even though we see the sperm tail here, we are seeing it as a blur of light because of all the different proteins that we put on it and all the fluorophores that come from it. And in fact, this is an image of a sperm tail with quick freeze deep etch. And each of these microtubules is about 400,000 times smaller than what we measure as the tail by immunofluorescence. So please, the only thing I want you to take away from this is don't believe your lying eyes. They are wrong. And there's a lot of room for lots of different things inside of cells. So don't think that even though you look at a cell that looks like it's totally jam-packed with things, it has a lot in there, because the imaging often exaggerates it. This is another image by quick freeze deep etch of the surface of a cell like an oocyte, where you can see each of these nanofibers. I mean, these are individual microfilaments. They're just amazing amount of complexity. And so, as David Keefe said, don't think that we know what we know, because we don't know even what we don't know. And maybe I can go on with that later. I want to shift for a few moments to talk about mitochondria, and there are between 10 and 14 coiled mitochondria at the base of a sperm head. And again, this is electron microscopy. You all know the brilliant work of John Zhang and his group on making the first mitochondrial transfer babies. And this is the publication, and you can see Sherman's on it as well as many other people, but it really is a pioneering paper in terms of the use of spindle transfer technologies for helping infertile couples. But I want to remind you that when you transfer a mitotic, when you transfer the meiotic spindle from an egg, it's not only the meiotic spindle that you're transferring. We recently showed, that there are remnants of the egg centriole that are still in the meiotic spindle. And we don't know what the implications of that egg centriole might be. And also, this is an important paper that just came out this month, that there's the tethering of mitochondria to the cortex of many cells that leads to uniparental transmission of mitochondria. So just because you have some plasma membrane over the meiotic spindle, it may be preferentially sending mitochondria to one part. There's another extraordinary paper looking at mice with mutant mitochondria. So these are mice with mutant mitochondria, and they're infertile. Just by overdriving the normal mitochondria, you're not knocking down the rotten mitochondria, you're overexpressing the healthy mitochondria, you can restore fertility. So even though I haven't been a big proponent of mitochondrial transfer and other things, there is evidence that putting in more healthy mitochondria may in fact overcome. And mitochondria are really quite remarkable, because you know the mitochondrion has its own genome. And this is a paper that came out at the beginning of the year. But it turns out that many of the mitochondrial proteins have dual citizenship. They are made in the mitochondria, but they play important roles in the cytoplasm. We often think of things from the nucleus going into the mitochondria, and I had never heard of or never thought about dual citizenship. Let me tell you, I wish I were a dual citizen right now, but I'll leave that alone. But in the mitochondrial proteins have dual citizenship. And there are rare cases in humans where the mitochondria comes from the father. So there's a lot going on, and even in the image that's misleading, there's a lot going on. I want to switch over for a second to the sperm tail and the sperm centriole. Don't think that these structures are static. It appears that every time a sperm tail beats, the central doublets move around in one direction and the outer doublets move in another direction. So there's probably a churning effect, like a water wheel or something. There's lots of things going on that we're just beginning to learn about. And there are a ton of proteins in the centrioles. And recently, we found atypical centrioles during human fertilization. And what we found basically was that in human sperm, by using high-resolution imaging, there's a vault-like structure. There's a basket-like structure at the base of the human sperm. And this structure plays an amazing role, an amazing role, because when the sperm enters the egg, its centriole in humans forms microtubules, and these microtubules move the sperm towards the egg nucleus and the egg nucleus towards the sperm. And I'm moving quickly because I have a lot to cover, but I see many new friends out there. And let me say that it's remarkable what the sperm and its centriole can do. Okay, imagine you're all mitochondria, right? You're all in this round egg cell. Hey, I'm a sperm. I can come through the back of the room or the front of the room. I can come anywhere. But my job is to find the egg nucleus. How do I find you? The trick is this structure called the sperm aster, which pushes me from the surface of the egg, the inner surface of the egg, towards the egg center. And in humans, the sperm, again, is bringing in the two centrioles. The sperm aster grows. Eventually, the sperm aster fills the volume of the egg, and the sperm nucleus and the egg nucleus come together so that you can form the first mitotic spindle. And if 2 sperm enter, you come in with 4 sperm. And there is a real challenge in the field, because we know that some men have defective centrioles. Some men have the ability for their sperm to enter their partner's eggs, but the eggs will not divide properly. They'll divide in a parthenogenetic way. I feel horrible because I tell the joke so many times, and dear friends have heard the joke so many times. But I love this slide because it was made by the French. It's about the genetics of infertility. And back in the 60s, when I was a student, they used to summarize the genetics of infertility that if your grandparents didn't have children and your parents didn't have children, well, at least statistically, it was unlikely that you were going to have children. You know, and I love him because, oh, God bless him, he laughs every time, you know. I love them. I mean, for Sherman, you know, you can see they gave the tower Viagra, but since it's the day after Yom Kippur, at least it's circumcised. But there is a real problem after ICSI, and that is ICSI does not mirror the normal events after fertilization. So again, I'm a sperm. I have an acrosome, and I got this in Egypt. And normally, the acrosome reaction takes place outside of the egg. The acrosome doesn't come into the egg. And yet with ICSI, you're injecting the sperm, acrosome intact and all. And we don't really know what are the problems that might arise from having all these acrosomal enzymes within the egg cytoplasm, but we do know that the DNA decondenses at a slower pace. There are structures involved in egg fusion that should be at the plasma membrane, like a tie or something, but they stay on the sperm throughout the first cell cycle, and this acrosomal kipa, yarmulke, whatever, has to come off before the first cell cycle starts. So there are a lot of things that are different after ICSI than after IVF. And so ICSI is miraculous. It's miraculous, but please, this is the first time that we have been manufacturing zygotes. These are not naturally conceived. These are almost handmade. They're manufactured. But let me get beyond this. I will go beyond that. Professor Keefe already explained to you that there are things that we don't know that we don't even know. And I want to move beyond that and talk now for the rest of my talk about forward-looking things that may well be delusional. I have not tried this on an audience, and I have airfare back home in case it goes badly. But I think we're at a point where we could think about 21st century precision spermatology. What is in a sperm exactly? How much of it's in there? What's essential and what's just carried over from spermatogenesis? And what's missing during male infertility? There are now websites that are looking at the various proteins that are in human sperm. Some groups say there are 7,000 proteins, some groups say fewer, but we should be able to very soon come up with an exact number, verify that number, and then ask what's missing and what isn't. What's there? There are also proteins, and I know Sherman's going to like this because it involves our second favorite organ, which is the epididymis. There are proteins that come from a post-testicular origin that are on sperm. Most of these come as the sperm moves down the track before it's being released. But there's the possibility that there are many other proteins in the body that end up on sperm or in sperm that aren't from a testicular origin. Now, I want to talk about something that's really quite bizarre. And this relies on work of Sherman and on Klaus and to some extent Monica and others. And that is, you know, a girl born today is going to spend more than half of her life in menopause. And there's a big push now to ask, what can we do for the elderly, me, and how can we improve the life, the health span as we all get older? And certainly there's great reasons to have optimism for ovarian transplants, ovarian slice transplants, as a way of forestalling, postponing, rejuvenating the ovary so that hormonal replacement isn't necessary, and you have all of the vitality of a fully functioning gonad. And I'd like to pose with you intellectually whether or not the sperm could also improve the health and longevity of men. Oh, I like this one. You can see that there are tadpoles, whoops, sorry, go back. There are tadpoles on the left, and then they metamorphosed into the right, and the doctor's saying, oh, you haven't had sex for a while, huh? And there's another one that I couldn't find where the doctor's telling the guy, yeah, I mean, you're old, but actually, your problem is that you're just too ugly for sex. And I raise that because, you know, there's a correlation with autism and neuropsychiatric disorders and older fathers. What if it's just that men who have reached their 50s, who haven't found a date, may not be that attractive in the first, I mean, they just might be on this, you know, they're a little off, let's say. You know, and it may not be age per se, but just the guys. I mean, so, you know, we just can't say it's just age. But there are papers now, including this nice review by Steve Austed, who is a leader in the aging field, about the way of extending lifespan and health span and the role of the gonads in terms of healthy aging. And the evidence appears as if the quality of a man's ejaculate, and specifically his sperm, is correlated with his longevity. Now, I know most guys are not going to want to go to a life insurance exam and produce a specimen, but it may well be that spermatogenesis is a biomarker for health and for vitality. Now, there have been some studies on whether there's a correlation. In particular, this one on the lifespan of Korean eunuchs. Now, I don't know how you get a human subject. Well, I guess Vardit will speak about the ethics of studying castrated people. But, oh, maybe that's setting you up too much. But it turns out, with eunuchs at least, they lived an average of 14 to 19 years longer than their counterparts, but they were living privileged lives within the palace. Interestingly, the royals, the kings, they died at 45. These guys died at 70, so it was better to be a eunuch in some ways than a royal. But it's amazing that there's a literature on this, including a shameful literature here in the United States, where mentally ill men, some of whom were castrated and some of whom weren't, the castrated men lived 14 years longer than the non-castrated men. Now, look, don't all run back to your rooms, you know. Although Pasquale's here now, I mean, you got your knife? Now, mostly these data are skewed because of the benefits of living within the palace life. And if any of you want the paper, I have it here. Oh, and there's a counter study here on exceptional longevity in Ashkenazi men who reproduced later and had smaller families. But I'll give that to the Ashkenazis if anybody asks me. But I want to come to the notion that maybe, like oocyte content, maybe like oocyte numbers are important for a woman. Could it actually be that the number of spermatogonia, the amount of spermatogenesis, the number of sperm produced, is correlated with longer lives? And the evidence is growing that sperm quality does seem to be associated with a lack of comorbidities. And where this becomes very important is, you're going to hear in a moment Sherman's pioneering work that Chaz Easley also did in my lab, where he did direct differentiation of pluripotent stem cells into spermatogenic cells in humans. And now he's done this in monkeys. And when he injects the monkey spermatids that were made in vitro into monkey eggs, they do nothing. But if you artificially activate the egg, you can make blastocysts, and he's going for pregnancies with these man-made, he's not a monkey, man-made sperm. So in vitro sperm may not be that far away. And also the brilliant work that Kyle Orwig has done using spermatogonial stem cell transplantation into monkeys to regenerate sperm function is incredibly important, because it may be that if, like in women, oocyte number depletion results in premature aging and health decline. May it be even that decreased spermatogenesis in men is associated with the loss of vigor and vitality, in which case maybe you can supplement things even with your own sperm, maybe not for fertilization purposes, but just for vitality. I mean, it's like when you go into a gas station, you say, hey, fill her up, you know. And so, look, I don't want to push this too far, but there are all these images of the fountain of youth, and I'm sure this is politically incorrect in the Me Too era, but it may well be that a man might have a fountain of youth, at least for himself. And I'm going to keep us on time and turn it over to our next speaker. And thank you for indulging my bad sense of humor.
Jerry, that was fantastic as usual. And actually, we do have a few minutes for questions because you really stuck to time perfectly. So there must be some questions.
That's for an andrologist. Hardy, please.
There's talk of ICSI being a technology that can create hereditary infertility and a generation of males who depend on ART in themselves. Is there any truth in that?
Sherman could speak to that better, but I would predict that the men who have microdeletions in their Y chromosome and have benefited from ICSI are likely to father boys who will have microdeletions and will benefit from ICSI, and the evidence may be there already for Sherman.
Yeah, the children derive from ICSI, and men with microdeletions have the same microdeletions. They don't expand, they don't decrease, but they're the same as their father. So, yeah, it's a growth industry.
Whether you're building a practice, a clientele for generations to come, but most people aren't that long-lived.
It also means your joke is not so funny, it's quite sad. Your joke about if your grandparents didn't have children and you didn't have children?
Yeah, no, I know, it is tragic. Look, I just atoned, you know, and I'm already, please.
So any other questions? Well, let me tell you, let me congratulate you. I think this is an exceptional talk, and I think that you have to try. This is more a TED talk than a real conference talk. So, but I think this is great. This is just, I mean, I think that it was absolutely outstanding. And I have just one comment. The comment is that maybe these eunuchs, they will live 10 years more, but don't you think that what a boring life? So at what extent this should be done?
There's the Broadway musical, Methuselah lived 900 years, but what gal's a given to any guy who lives 900 years? Literally, our task in front of us is making sure that our health span is identical to our lifespan, so that we're like incandescent light bulbs, so that we live long and then we go out like the filament of an incandescent light bulb. You don't want to be a fluorescent light bulb that flickers for decades. And no, I'm serious, there are questions about Alzheimer's vaccines, and they're coming along, and one of the concerns is, what happens if you vaccinate your mom or your dad, and they live another 20 years, but without any cognitive improvement? So, I mean, you know, it's funny, but it's also, for those of us aging, tragic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.